Do you guys even remember this game? There was so much hype for it, but then like they only released it in like Japan, right? So yeah, we're gonna go ahead and watch the situation of it. Apparently, like the title says, it's not good, but let's go ahead and listen to why it's not good and see why it should be delayed and whatnot. I actually didn't even know it was gonna actually still come to global. To be honest, I thought they gave up on the idea. Whee!
So I wanted to communicate to everyone living outside Japan the situation with Blue Protocol. I haven't
Or anyone not using a VPN.
really seen anyone mention what's going on recently, and I thought it would be nice for people to know and understand exactly what's going on. Blue Protocol has been getting updates every once a month, and now while that sounds
Oh, that
nice,
sounds actually bad. To be honest, games like this need an update more than once a month. And plus, like updates could be something so small, like a bug fix. To be honest.
it hasn't really revitalized the game to what it once was on release or even a few months
Wait,
after
wait, wait,
release.
wait. Actually, I need to look at that map. Okay, so let's see, let's see. I can't really read this to be honest. Official release. These are the release. Okay, these are the months. These are each month. So it goes down the list like that then. There's no story on that month. It's field exploration, a new mission, so it's like side stuff, content, uh-huh, chapter 4, and then it looks like about wait 4 months. In about 4 months, it goes to a new chapter for the story. So they're not working too much on the story, I guess, but more of like the missions and whatnot. Don't know what missions mean though. Could just be like a lame side quest or like event mission. You know those limited time events? It's probably those.
Or even a few months after release. The game has been steadily declining in popularity in the JP region and hasn't experienced any sustainable recovery in its 1 year of service, which is really sad to see as I'm a fan of this game since I've heard about it back in 2019.
I mean, I'm also a fan of the game, like, but I didn't get to play it. And honestly, um, if it's gonna go out like this, it must mean there's something bad with like the game core mechanics.
Where I saw the game having so much potential, but it's getting very mismanaged so far. So before I dive deep into this topic, a little backstory about me. I did play the game for about 2,000 hours in
Two
Max Barber
thousand?
class. I also placed top 3 in a few of the game's leaderboards. I made a couple test
Wow,
guides here
good
and there.
job.
I love this game. I love to beta test it so that the overseas version can be better. But recently, I and many friends that also played are starting to push hard.
Oh, look at that. Wow, that's a lot of people to be honest. They all got together for a photo. It's like the going away photo of when the game's about to like collapse, you know?
Okay, and cut a lot of playtime from this game. It's core problems and bugs that have not been fixed that are killing off the player base. It's pretty evident that the game isn't doing well when you look at statistics. According to people on 5chan, Japan's version of 4chan, Blue
That's
Protocol is currently
interesting.
ranked 119th place on games with total sales on Japan PlayStation Store with a rating of 2.5. It
Oh,
has roughly stayed around that rating since the launch of console back
that's good,
in
right?
December 2023. The sales ranking tends to spike when the game gets a major update, but gradually goes down even further every time.
Major update, I'm sure, by meaning like every 4 months, right? Like the story.
It's important to note that console is still huge in Japan. According to an article in 2023, over 70% of every JP gamer is using a console regularly. Now, I believe mobile likely overtook console in this year, but console should still be relatively up there. This means that the console ranking and rating paints a fairly accurate conclusion with how the game is holding up on both PC and console. Then you have a Japanese game journalist website saying that Bandai's Blue Protocol is part of the blame for Bandai losing profit in the current fiscal year.
Bandai Online cutting around 16% of its staff of 250 employees since the start of this year. Players speculate
Did I
how
speed
many
it up?
current users are left, which is estimated to be about 4,000, which lines up with how hard it is making
No.
content.
Okay, it's
and most of the open world zones being a ghost town supporting this.
It's a huge rabbit hole, but to summarize, the game isn't doing that great.
The game
Now,
is
what are
dying.
these issues that are holding this game back? Well, the first is the lack of content. This has been a complaint since the game launched, and very little has been done a year later. A common misconception is how people outside the JP region see JP getting all this content.
That's actually pretty cool though. Just like a group of people running together, like clearing stuff. That's actually pretty sick.
Live streams and assumes the game is doing well. Well, the reality is that JP is not doing well. Most of the content is copy-pasted dungeons that have almost no exciting fights in them and many uninspired.
So it's like playing one of those solo JRPG games that's like a grind fest, I guess, but with other players. You know those games where like you get to play with other characters in your party, but like you command all of them and you just go through the copy and paste dungeons? That's exactly what this seems to be, but with automated players that are completely random. Like Sword Art Online.
Almost every dungeon is.
You remember those
run to the next
JRPG
room,
games?
Gather all the enemies, elites, bosses together, press all buttons in almost any order, and then repeat until no more rooms.
That sucks. Here's one thing they could do. Less mobs, more core mechanics for certain enemies. Just throw in some uniqueness to the thing and not just turn it into a grind. And I think more people will play it for one of the things, at least.
A lot of cases, there's no strategy involved after gathering the enemies due to a bug that freezes all enemies, causing them to do nothing if too many skills are hitting too many enemies.
Oh,
on the
that's
map. This has been a bug for almost a year now.
almost a year and they haven't done anything? Wow, they just straight up threw in the towel.
And has hurt a lot of the potential the fights could have had. I don't believe that these specific pieces of content will get much better if Bandai fixes the bug, because there's still a core issue with the combat, which is DR, or damage reduction. So what do I mean by that? The game has too many ways of lowering damage taken to flat out negating damage altogether in some cases.
Yeah, I can kind of see that because you see their health, right? It hasn't really been going down, and they've kind of just been gathering everything. It's like life leech or something.
Yes, you can take 0 damage. The DR system makes many forms of hard content too easy and makes farming content boring for many people.
But yeah, exactly like I said. Less mobs, less AoE pulling mechanics, more like you have to dodge the mobs. You know, like those boss fights and like raids where like you have to do kind of like mechanics and stuff? I think they need to add that into this game more often than not, even for like lesser enemies.
This is getting worse as more forms of DR are being introduced. Bandai doesn't seem to have acknowledged this problem, which is unfortunate because, well,
the thing is, I think they acknowledged the problem, but like that is a kind of gameplay style that some people do like. It's like the overpowered-esque feeling that you get in like JRPG solo games, because by the end game you want to be able to be so powerful you don't take any damage but you can still dish out damage, but that doesn't really work in an online environment. So I think it's more if they're just having a different kind of perspective and just taking their copium soup.
Probably not going to see any changes done to this for a really long time. Okay, so I was about to finish editing this video, but wanted to include this bit of information because I felt it was important, because some of my information kind of sounded like it overlapped. If the content is too easy, then why isn't everyone pretty much clearing it, you know? The fact lies in how the game doesn't really teach the players how to play the game. Many players get to max level by pressing their auto attack and occasionally 1 to 2 skills.
There's an auto attack. Interesting. They brought in that PSO2 auto attack.
Let me show you an example of how to farm in the open world. Okay, so I was about to show an example of open world leveling, but turns out most of the open world leveling zones are pretty dead with no players. No big surprise there. So I'm just going to demonstrate it by open world farming, which is pretty much the same as open world leveling. So pretty much you just sit in one spot, press
Wow.
lock on,
That's...
spam your basic skills.
That is tragic. You might as well just put an auto AFK fight button in. There's no
Yep.
there's no gameplay mechanic to it. It's just, oh, why do they have that?
And this is pretty much it. We just stand in one spot.
What were they thinking?
Another option to level is to do dungeons, which goes back to my previous point that it's just a running simulator for new players. Typically, post-release, new players get carried into dungeons by veteran players, farming the dungeon on their alt classes. Today, players pretty much don't need to know what their class does to reach endgame farming dungeons and reach max gear score right after. So when players go from content that doesn't require much level thinking to immediately content that requires them to know how to stack buffs and debuffs, know how DR works, understand how to dodge if DR isn't available, how to rotate buffs with other players, how to do a basic rotation, or like even...
I mean, that does sound kind of complicated, to be honest, but like the fact that the game doesn't teach you that kind of sucks. And yeah, I do understand that does make the game much the curve is like way too much. It's like you ran into a 90-degree wall instead of like a 30 to 60
DPS on the class, then they don't want to run it anymore because it's too daunting to learn everything at once in order to not grief the run. Once you understand,
But that's also sad. The fact that like after you learn all this, the whole fact is none of the enemies are different then. You just have to do that and then you'll be fine.
all these concepts though, then you realize that the content is actually pretty easy. And
Exactly.
trust me when I say that many players do not understand.
It's the same problem that I had in Final Fantasy 14, but I guess it's kind of a bit more better for the fact that they do have mechanics and stuff. However, it's like half of it, like if you're just gonna play casually and like do the main stuff and not ultimates and whatnot, it's like you learn the mechanics, then you're set. Like you don't have to do anything. But I don't know what endgame is exactly in Blue Protocol. I don't know if they're gonna cover it or maybe they already did. But if it's just learning that part of it, like the buffs and whatnot in DR, then the game is that's not good.
Understand how to play their class or understand the gearing system. For example, there's many players at endgame farming dungeons that use B-Imagines that don't provide much for themselves or the team, and it's common to have classes that give 10 to 20% debuffs to enemies, and these players are not casting these skills for most of the farming run. So realistically, the only big motivation left if the fights aren't that good yet is the progression. However, even progression has its problems. It's a sucky feeling to have to grind a copy-pasted dungeon when there isn't much content to use it on as an average player. Then after about 1 or 2 months, most of the gear you grinded for becomes irrelevant as new copy-pasted dungeons get released offering slightly stronger gear.
That blows.
And then according to a survey Bandai done in October of 2023, only 5% of their player base actually cared about extremely challenging content where you have
That is okay, time attack and score attack is sure that's challenging content, but I feel like what's advanced missions though? Like what's that? Is that like maybe different kind of mechanics for a game?
to use min-max gear. Bandai continues to release these types of challenging content that a small fraction of the player base cares about, while continuing to release copy-pasted content for the majority audience.
That blows.
That's what's actually being shown to JP players in these live streams, and why JP people are upset. They feel neglected that content is being isolated for only a single-digit % of the player base. On top of that, most of the newer challenging content is generally a clear once for the new cosmetics and then never again type of content. So naturally, less people would want to try it, as there isn't enough incentive to do it. There isn't enough content in the game that would make the average player want to keep playing. Now,
So they're just in a they're in a constant state of denial then. The fact that they ask for a voting thing and then it's just like, anyways, I heard your opinions, but check this out. You see these guys? These are the minorities. They're more important, all right? I mean like personally, I think that's cool and all to do every now and then, but like you gotta like the world is run by majority ruling, right? So personally, I think they need to also recognize them too, and then come to a consensus of both. You know what I mean? It's not just focus on one.
if the content wasn't the deal breaker, it would be the amount of bugs and
Bunny.
optimizations the game is riddled with.
Who's that bunny?
1-2-1 error bug is a notable one. It happens very often in solo instances. If your ping happened to spike for any reason for a fraction of a second, the game would kick you out and you would often lose all your progress in the solo instance.
Wow, that actually is terrible. Like, what? Imagine having like a thunderstorm going on outside. Imagine having rain that day. Imagine having winds. Just crazy things that can like mess your ping up. What if like someone in your family just started a YouTube video?
This is incredibly frustrating within instances where you are in there for almost 10 minutes and suddenly you get kicked. 1-2-1 error code can also happen in raid activities where too many skills are registering on a single target, causing the boss to be unable to fight back or do anything, while also occasionally disconnecting some of the people in the raid. The disconnection mid-raid...
What do you mean? That's a boss mechanic, right? They're like, no, I can't do anything. There's only one thing to do. Pulse plug.
can also cause people to be temporarily banned from doing raids.
What?
Keep in mind that these raids
Oh
are
my
on an
gosh.
hourly schedule, so being kicked out of one might mean that you have to wait a few hours until the next raid is...
Yeah, and if you imagine that, a lot of people work and stuff, so once you get kicked out of that raid, you're not going back until like the next day.
up. It's incredibly frustrating, and there doesn't seem to be like any sort of solution in sight, as it's been happening for months now. And then that's just one bug out of 180 plus.
I'm so
bugs
sad
listed
'cause the
on
game looks
official
great.
Blue Protocol page. If you want to check out the rest of the bugs for yourself, I will post a link in the description
Aesthetic
below.
wise, appeal
And
wise.
then there's also some optimizations,
Visual-wise,
like
I mean.
camera being jarring on some classes, the pain of auto picking up low-level gear and having to sell it later, the amount of clicks needed to upgrade plugs or gear. All of these are not that big, but add to the amalgamation of issues that would otherwise
So
burn
a dozen for 10. Wow. So like about over 100 clicks, huh?
the average player out. Now, with all that in mind, there's still a lot that Bandai has done well in the game. The Be Imagine system, which might be where Withering Waves got the idea for Echoes, is very fun to use. The skills are nice to use, and there's a lot of optimizations you can do with them to make them very fluid. The graphics are great if you have a strong enough PC to handle it. The story is decent. All of this shows that the game has potential to pop off if it's managed better. I think management needs
I mean, honestly, just give the game to someone else. I feel like anyone else would do better.
to understand who its target
Like, give it to NCSoft even. Like, I feel like they would even do better. Like, oh,
audience is and cater to them and not the 5% sweaty tryhards. These guys are killing most of the casuals by releasing fun content that they cannot do. Just look at WildStar or currently Lost Ark.
WildStar. WildStar. Why does that sound familiar? Is that like a super duper old game? Because it sounds familiar, but I haven't heard of anything about it for over 20 years, if anything.
Two games aren't popular, with one of the problems being the devs care way too much about the hardcore player base.
Lost
and not
Ark's great,
giving
though.
enough attention to everyone.
I say it's great, but like there's a lot of menus, so that's still a problem to me.
Else. Blue Protocol seems to be following that same path, and I hope they don't stick with it. With the new arena content shown where you fight this like boss out of Terra looks very exciting, and I can't wait to try it out. Unfortunately, it's another piece of content that's not supposed to be cleared by at least 90% of the player base. So if we're ever getting change, it won't be for a while, it seems. Bandai does seem like they're releasing minigames as update, and
I mean, minigames, to be honest, is actually something that would make the game better. Like, let's be honest. If most of them are casual or they're forced to be casual and they're still fine with it, they would definitely play the minigames.
housing in a future update. Maybe there's still hope for the majority, but I hope they do something about the
Beach
combat and
volleyball.
progression, which are the game's main selling points at the moment besides the cosmetics. Well, anyways, if you want to see the new update at the end of this month, stop by my Twitch channel. You will be able to chat with me and
Yeah, be sure to watch his Twitch channel, which should be in his description right here. But yeah, it's gonna be this video, the origins of it is gonna be in the description as always. So be sure to give him your support. Thank you for taking your time to make such a thing. Like, wow, I am shocked that all this even happened to the game. I thought I was having good news, but like, it just went down the drain. I'm hoping, I hope that, like, for their sake, that the game does get better, because 2,000 hours and the game hasn't been doing too well, but still playing it to show support. You, Bandai, you guys have you have a fan base, or it might even not even be Bandai. It's just Blue Protocol. Blue Protocol has a fan base. Don't let them down now. Let some down, but not all. Let the minority down and not the majority at the very least. All right. Well, guys, if there's any more Blue Protocol that you want me to watch, let me know. Otherwise, I'll see you guys next time for any other thing. Alrighty. Peace.